Greetings and salutations! This is video number 4 in the series called Linux Terminal Basics. What you just saw is what happens when the keyboard shortcut to start the screen recording software is exactly the same as the keyboard shortcut you use to open up a tool to search the history in Bash. And that's what we're looking at is Bash, the terminal. We are in a virtual machine this time around simply because some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, it's a little system sensitive and you need to be careful if you're going to be following along. It shouldn't hurt anything, but when you start digging around and you start talking about system users and system groups and things like that, if you make a mistake you could mess something up, so do be careful. We're also going to take a look at aliases and functions at the end of this video, but the main course here is definitely going to be users and groups because it's a very important subject when you're dealing with Linux systems. We get all of this functionality from the world of Unix. Remember that Linux is a Unix work-alike, and Unix is a system that was developed to work on big computers, computers that had potentially hundreds of users. And so there's a lot of built-in security about dealing with users, and the system also has this notion that everything is owned by somebody. Not just files and directories, we've already talked about that, but processes running on the machine. They have to be owned by somebody. Some user somewhere needs to have started those up. So this is a big subject. We're taking a very informal look as we are throughout this entire series. We're going to be just glancing right over the top. If you want to learn more, go off and find out for yourself. How much of this you're actually going to use if you are running a Linux desktop or laptop computer and you don't have any other accounts on it, I really don't know. But it's good information to have, especially if someday you do have to administer a system that has lots of users. So, we are assuming for this video series that you know a little bit about the terminal, that you have edited some files, you may have run a bunch of commands, stuff like that, that you already kind of know your way around the system. And we are using Ubuntu 18.04 running Bash as our example. Just want to make sure I put that out there. So let's jump in and talk a bit about users and what they do on a Linux system. We're going to take a look at a file. It's called passwd. And that probably doesn't make any sense. I'm going to get a list of users from a file called passwd. But this is how it works, ladies and gentlemen. So we are reading this file, and you will see that it is a long file. This is running in the less reader. And look at this. We can just page down and we go through all of these different users. Now, when you created your account, when you installed your Linux system or somebody created it for you, you probably thought, well, I guess I'm the only user. It's me and the root user and that's it, right? No. There are many other users on the machine. They are system users. They are created by different programs and services so that they can run processes on the machine. Remember, everything has to be owned by somebody. And a lot of these are created by the system itself and different things that are running on it. There is a user here on the list called Nobody. Nobody is like the standard user that the system reverts to if it has to run something and it needs to blame it on someone, so it will blame it on Nobody. Nobody always gets the blame. Nobody has no privileges on the system. So I'm looking for Nobody here on the list. And I'm not seeing it, but I know it's got to be here somewhere. And somebody's pointing at the screen going, oh, it's right there. Oh, there he is. I see. Right here. This is the Nobody user. So you notice that he really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the system. His name is Nobody. He's non-existent. His shell is user/sbin, no login, nothing. So let's go down and look at us. Well, in this case, it's Joe because this is my machine. And you'll see that we have a line here, and it says I'm user 1000, which is the default first user ID number that is given out on Unix and Linux systems. I think Fedora it uses 500 to start. The system itself really doesn't care about your name, and it doesn't care about all this other stuff. It just goes by that user ID. And also your group ID is going to be 1000 as well for the group that's created called Joe. So what do we got? The first thing here in this line that we're looking at is the username itself. This represents the password. That is an X. We don't actually get the password listed here. That is encrypted elsewhere on the machine. And then the next thing, like I said, is our user ID number, our group ID number, then our full name. This information right here, all of this stuff with the commas, is called finger information. And this goes back to the early days of Unix as well, because you would have one machine, a lot of people would have terminals on it, and you would have information about the user that other users could look up. And we don't really use that much anymore, but it's there and it still does what it's supposed to do. Then it tells us where our home directory is, which is going to be in /home/Joe. And finally, it tells us what the assigned shell is going to be. So this password file here has a lot of information in it, and it is not advisable to edit this file directly. There are commands that allow us to do that in a very orderly way. So yeah, I guess you could do it, but if you get one thing wrong, then you're going to mess the whole thing up. Don't do it. This is just to look at, and it's where this information is stored. This is also very useful to know where this information is stored if for some reason you have to rebuild a system that has several users on it. Because when you rebuild the system, for everything to match back up, you want their user ID numbers and group numbers to match up to what they were before. So even if it's you, Jill, George, and Jean who are using the system, the order in which those users are created is very good to know, so you can do that exactly the same way, so all of their user files will match back up. And this is where you can find it. So this is the password file which lives in etc. So you've seen that we have all those users. So let's go ahead and, it's a chicken before the egg sort of thing when you start talking about users and groups. But we'll do users first, and then we'll talk about groups. So what you can do here from the command line is create a new user for your system. There are actually two commands that are available to you that actually do this. One of them is user add, and the other one is add user. And they work slightly differently. Now, you want to talk about a dyslexic's nightmare. It's remembering which one of those you want to use for whatever task you're trying to perform. I had to write it down. I'm holding a legal pad in my hand right now that has this written down, so I don't mess this up. But the one we're going to be looking at today is add user, because add user is a bit more friendly and automated than user add, and they both do the same things. It's just how you want to get it accomplished. So let's create a user on our system, and his name is going to be Bob. Bob is our friend, and we've decided that Bob is going to get an account on our computer so he can log in and do whatever he wants to do. So real simple, sudo add user, and then Bob. His name will be Bob. And we will put the password in. You have to do this as root. The root user is the only person on the system that can do this stuff. So we had a lot of things happen very quickly there. So it said first that it was adding the user named Bob. It added a new group called Bob, and the group ID is 1000. So that's what you're seeing on this second line right here. Next thing it's doing is adding the new user Bob 1001 with the group Bob. Well, it created the user first, and then it added him to the group. That's what's going on there. Created a home directory, and that's /home/Bob. That's where he ought to be. Copying files from etc/skel. What is that? Well, the distribution wants you to have certain files when you create a new user. So it goes into this directory called skel, which is short for skeleton, and that moves in some basic configuration files for each new user that's created on the system, like .bashrc, You can put, if you yourself, as the administrator, put something in Skell, or you modify something in Skell, then what happens is you will actually determine what happens when a new user is created. So that's a functionality that as an administrator you can get into. Add something to Skell and it will be copied to a new user's home directory. Now it's asking us for a new Unix password. That tells you how old this tool is, gang. That goes back a long way. So I'm going to give him a simple password. Let's just Bob1. That's it. That's real secure, right? But there you go. Now we get finger information. And finger information is going back to those old days of having those big computers that are used by a lot of people. And so you get a full name here. You get a room number. Now that could be your office, or it could be your classroom, or whatever the situation. I told you this is old school. And then you got a work phone number. You can put that in there. You can do the home phone number as well if you want to share that information. And then if you want to put anything else in here, you have a place to do so. Hitting enter just adds nothing, and you confirm whether the information is correct, and it's like, yeah, okay, it's correct. I remember years ago, and I will not take too much time because I'm going to digress a little bit, but the first time that I ever used a Unix system, I was working in this radio station, had a great big news department in it. This is old days of radio. This kind of radio just doesn't exist in this country anymore. Honestly, it was a great big radio station. And we had this computer system in there that we just called the computer. And there were terminals all over the building. They were green screen. And I can still remember that my username was Joe C. and my password was WOWO. And those of you who've been around for a while will remember the rockin' radio station in Fort Wayne, Indiana that had the huge signal that you could hear all over the country at night. That's where I got that from. But it didn't work there. It was another radio station. But that was my password. I actually remember that because I used that computer for like 4 years. And the thing was, is I was just a regular user. I just used it to get ball scores and stuff like that, because we had all the UPI AP network and fed into this thing, and CBS. We were a CBS affiliate, so we got stuff through there. So that's what it was used for, was writing news copy, keeping up with news copy, some other functions, printers all over the building and things like that. So doing this always takes me back to that, because I remember when I got my account set up on that machine and had to go through all this stuff. It's a little story there, gang. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. So we have created Bob's account. Let's clear the screen, why don't we? And let's see if we can log in as Bob. Let's see if this works. So we will SU Bob, and really super secret password I gave Bob, Bob1. Now you notice that it took it a little while to get itself together. The first login, it probably was doing some configuration stuff in the background. Let's see what we actually get in here. We'll list Bob's home directory, and you notice that the only thing we've got is examples.desktop. I don't know if we logged in the first time with the desktop environment, whether it would go on and create the directories that you're used to seeing, like videos, music, documents, and stuff like that. But in my past experience, you don't necessarily get those if you do this from a command line. So Bob is on our system. Yay, Bob. Nice to see you. Okay, so we'll get back to Bob in just a few moments here. We're going to do some more to Bob. The next thing that we need to talk about is groups, because we're going to add Bob to some groups. And I got into my own account on here because right now Bob's not a member of any groups, but I want to show you the groups that are set up on the system already. So this concept of groups, remember we talked about files, and files could be owned by a group, and we talked a little bit about that was a way to keep work teams on a basis where they had permissions to work on mutually shared files, that sort of thing. Well, the system does that as well, and in Debian and Ubuntu and some other systems, groups are used as a way to dole out privileges to users. So you'll see that the groups that I am in Joe, I'm in admin, I'm in CD-ROM, which means that I get access to the DVD thing if it's here, that sort of thing. I'm in the sudo group. I'm in the dip group. I don't know what that is. Plug dev. I guess that would mean that I'm allowed to plug in devices and they pop up and I have access to them. And then we got more groups here. Samba share at the end. You get the idea, right? I don't know what all they do because I don't pay any attention to this stuff. In some Linux distributions, we have lovely little graphic tools that allow us to deal with this. So you can look under users and groups and you'll have a thing there that shows you what groups a user is in, and you can add them to the groups and it'll list all the groups on the computer, and you can do this and that and the other thing. Ubuntu does not have that. Ubuntu has just where you can create user accounts, change the password on the account, and delete the user account. They expect you to either not have to do this or you do it all in the terminal. Most regular people who use these things on desktops don't need to worry too much about groups, but occasionally you will add a piece of software to the system that will require you to be in its group because it will create a system group. VirtualBox is a good example of that. And we'll show you how to do that here in just a second. So Bob is a regular user. He does not have sudo privileges. He can't install software. He can't do stuff on the system. So let's make Bob able to do that. We really trust Bob. Bob is our friend. And it's like, yeah, we don't mind if you go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and get back into Bob's account. We're going to log in as Bob. We don't have to log in as Bob to do this, but we're going to do it anyway. Well, actually, we can't. So let me get out of that. I got ahead of myself. Let's just give no password. It'll get mad and throw us out. Yep, exactly. We can't do it as Bob. Bob doesn't have sudo privileges. We have to give Bob the sudo privileges. So why log in as Bob? Duh. So we are going to add Bob. Once again, we use adduser Bob to the group called admin. And he's been added. Let's also add him to sudo. I think you can put more than one in at a time, but we'll do it one at a time here. Okay, so now Bob is in sudo. That means that he should now have access to the system, and now we can log in as Bob. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, must have flubbed the keystrokes. Now you notice that Bob, as soon as he logs in, gets informed that he is now a member of the administrator group. And he can now do things as root. So we can work as Bob if we want to. That's how you add people to users and groups. Very cool indeed. So now let's talk a little bit about passwords. And the gang, there's a lot more to groups than that. We've just really glanced over. You can add groups personally. You can add your own groups to the system for whatever reason. You can delete groups. You can go research how to do that. But mainly what you're going to be needing to do is adding users to groups that already exist, that are configured by software or the system itself. Let's go ahead and clear this screen. So let's talk about passwords. There are a lot of different things that you can do with passwords on a Linux system. You can change them. You can set them up where they are only good for a period of time. And you can lock the passwords to make them useless. Let's say that you need to, for some reason, lock an account for a while so nobody can get into it. And you can remove the password from an account. And this leads us to talking a little bit about how Ubuntu handles the root account, because this messes a lot of people up. Old Linux, the way it worked is that we would have 2 accounts minimum on each machine. You, as a regular user, would have an account, and then there would be the root account. We can use sudo to act as the root user. That's a kind of a shortcut that we have. We don't have to log out of our account and log into root. So it's like the old days. You would put in su like this or su root, and it would take you to the root account, and then you'd have to give the root user's password and all that stuff. Ubuntu doesn't work that way. When Ubuntu is installed, the root account is created but disabled. And it's disabled because the password is locked. And so therefore, you can't log in as root. Nobody can technically log in as root on an Ubuntu system. And this gives it a little bit more security, especially if you have a system that has SSH running and it's available on the public internet, because it's really hard to become root or log in as root on one of those systems if the root account doesn't exist. You can activate the root account, and the way you would do that in Ubuntu is to type sudo password and then enter. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to activate the root account on this machine. And it will ask you for a new password, and if you put it in there, now you have an activated root account. If you want to get rid of that, then it would be sudo password, and then you would put an L on it. And I don't think you have to specify root, but you could specify root. Either way, one of the other ways it's going to work. I'm not going to run the command, so you get the idea. Then you could lock that root account once again. My thing is just not to mess with it. I just let it go the way the Ubuntu developers set it up for us. What you're going to be doing is changing people's passwords. Now, sometimes with graphic desktops, you're going to run into an issue that if you change their password, the keyrings that are stored in the desktop don't get to word, and then you get some interesting things where you're being prompted for new passwords all the time. Best thing to do in that case is delete the keyrings and let them be redone. And some of you are going, what's he talking about? Well, if you ever run into that situation, you'll find out. If you change the password, especially at the terminal, then we have a problem. What I use password for is one function and one function only, and that is to create passwords on new accounts that I generate on the machine. Since we did this from the terminal, we were automatically prompted for a password. But if you use the graphic tool to do that, let's go take a look at that graphic tool while I'm going on about this. If you use the graphic tool, then you're going to notice that if you go to create a new user, if you go to set the password through the graphic tool, then it's going to get all pissy with you, and it's going to want you to put in a stronger password. It's got a password test on it. I personally find that to be very annoying, simply because of the fact that it's my system, I'm the administrator. If I want to use a password which simply consists of the letters F and U, I'll do that. Excuse me. So what I will do is I will create, let's go ahead and unlock this. I will create a user here, but then I will not set the password. We can always make people available, we can put them in the no password login group, and they can log in as well. That's something that I haven't talked about. So if you don't want to set a password where people are prompted when they log in, you can do that here. You can do that from the graphic, but you're not going to be able to. I don't know how to do that from the terminal, but I just wanted to point out that it existed. I think you can. You just put people in a certain group, and it'll do that. And that's how it works on Linux Mint for sure. It's no password login. So anyway, I will create the account using this tool right here, but then I will not set the password, and that bypasses that thing. If you're going to be changing passwords in a graphic environment, probably best to do it with that tool. So let's just mess up Bob's world and change his password so you'll see how that works. So we're going to do sudo password, and then we're going to do Bob. And it's going to ask me for a new Unix password. So we're going to make his new password a little stronger. This time it's Bob123. And it changed successfully. So let's make sure that works. And it's going to ask me for that. 1, 2, 3. Well, it let me log in. So very cool. We're all right. And I haven't actually done anything with sudo from here. So there you go. Well, now Bob's messing up on your computer now. But the honeymoon is over. You and Bob are getting in arguments. Bob is installing things that you don't want on your system. So you can disable Bob's account, like I said, by locking it. So let's lock the account. And we're going to lock his account. So now, if I try and get in as Bob, look what happens. I get an authentication failure, even though I know for sure I'm typing the password incorrectly. Bob's going to come to you and go, hey, I can't get in my account. And then you can go talk to him and go, well, you know, dude, it's like you keep messing up the world here. So then you would want to unlock his account. And you know what? I didn't write this down, so I'm going to see if I can do this. Let's just see if this works, because I think this is what it is. Let's see if it's you. Yes, that unlocks the account. So now you've straightened Bob out, and Bob's like, I won't do that kind of stuff anymore. I'll be a nice guy. And so now we should be able to log right in. Yes, I got in. So we let Bob have his account back, and then the next time you sit down at your computer, there's all kinds of nastiness on there, and there's programs you didn't want to do, and he's changing the system, and he did all, and now you're mad, you're done. It's like, I am tired of messing with you, Bob. Bob's got to go, man. Bob's getting on my nerves. So how do we get rid of Bob? Well, the command is userdel. We're going to do this with root privileges. It's from the top here. So the command is sudo userdel, and we need to get rid of Bob. And we want to not only get rid of Bob, we want to get rid of Bob and all his files and everything. Bob's going to be off the system. Bob could be logged into the system through SSH right now, and using that little F flag on here means that he's going away. Sometimes you want to delete the user but keep his files. This happens a lot in businesses. They have some sort of policy that says, hey, we got to hang on to these user files for 90 days or a year or whatever, depending on what the policy is at the company. So you'll delete the user, and then you'll leave the files in the system until such time as you don't need them anymore, and then they go away. But in this case, this is a personal system, and we're just going to rock Bob's world, and he's no longer going to be here. Bob is gone. He no longer has an account on this system. So if we type in users, that tells us who's logged in. That won't tell us. Let's look at, that one just tells you who's logged in. It doesn't tell you how many users are actually on the system. Let's see here. What do I want to see? etc, and then we're going to look at the password account. Duh, my brain was like freezing up going, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. So we go down here, look, Bob's gone. Bob doesn't exist. He's not on the system. We go all the way down, and it's just me. Bob would have been listed just below me because he was user 1001. So he's not there anymore. No trace of Bob. Bob's gone. So that's how you deal with users and groups. And like I said, there's more to this. There's add group. You can delete groups. You can all kinds of little sub things. There's subgroups and all kinds of weird stuff that you can do. And we didn't even get into any of that stuff. I just wanted to introduce you to those ideas. Now, the last thing I want to show you is something that you might find very useful, and that is a command called chfn. And we're not going to type all that out. It's chfn, and you do not have to be a root user to use it, because chances are you'll probably use it on your own system. On your own account. You could use it on other accounts on your system. So let me show you how this works. So we'd use chfn Joe, and it's going to ask for my password. And now you'll see that we can change this information. You are asked your name at the beginning when you install. What if you put something in there that you don't want? Maybe you want to go back and put your whole name in, or maybe you want to change it to something else. Here is where you can do that. So I already pressed enter. I think that's why it accepted the first one. So we're not going to add a room number. Let me do that one more time. Password, because I'm supposed to be able to change the name in chfn. Changing the user information for Joe, enter the new value or press enter for the default. Oh, you can't change that. I see. You can't change that unless you are the root user. Haha. So let's go ahead and get out of that. chfn, and Joe, like so. Now I can confirm or deny the name, but I'm going to leave everything the same. You can add this information if you want to. Last command to look at, chfn. You see how that works. So if you need to edit that name, you need to do it as root. If you're going to be editing room number and phone number stuff, or you're going to put other in there, then you can. Now what's interesting is that we have this finger information. On some desktops you will have a little utility called About Me, where you can change that if you want to. That's not included with like regular Ubuntu though. And what's really funny is that the finger command itself, which is the command that you would use to look up that information about other users, that isn't even installed on regular Ubuntu. If you need that functionality, you have to set it up. But the chfn command works. So if you misspell your own name, that's why that's useful. All right, gang, so we've had fun with that. I think that's a good introduction, and you guys can go off and find more information. Next thing we're going to look at is working with aliases and functions and how you can make the system bend to your will. So as we have touched on in earlier videos, you have a file which is actually created when you create your user account. It comes from the SKEL directory called bashrc. It's provided by the system. And this changes your environment in bash. This sets up different variables, your path statement, what the colors in your cursor, in your prompt. It could all be in here. But one of the main things that you will see in here are aliases. You already have a few hooked up, so it's already in the system. So let's go ahead and take a look here at an alias and how you can do it. So when you actually type ls, you're actually running this command right here. ls -- color - auto. And that way you get the colored directories. That's how that works. And this is an alias. So an alias can be a really quite simple thing. Let me go ahead and get out of here. Let's set up an alias. We don't need to actually write it to a file to do it. An alias just works at a terminal at any time. So we're going to make our alias equal, let's see, rm equals single quotes rm-i. Now what that does is it takes the remove command and puts it in interactive mode. So let's go ahead and put that alias in memory. It's done. Now let's create a file, and I'm going to remove that file as we have done in past videos using rm. Watch what happens this time around though. It asks me, do you really want to get rid of this file? Really? Honestly? So I put a Y in there. Now it deletes the file. That puts RM in interactive. You might want to do that for your mom if she's running Linux and she's going to be fooling around in a terminal, because ordinarily the terminal just assumes, hey, you know what you're doing. I'll take your word for it. You want to delete 3/4 of your file system? Go right ahead. Oh, your entire music library that you've been collecting for 20 years? See ya, it's gone. Doesn't really care. But if you put it in interactive mode, it's nice. So how do we make this stick? Well, we've got to put it in the bashrc file. What will happen in the bashrc file is that it will be read into memory as soon as we log into the terminal or our desktop. Anywhere we log in, even through an SSH, this will be read. So all of this stuff will automatically show up in the terminal and be useful for us. So let's do bashrc. What we're going to do is use nano, and then we're going to edit bashrc, which is our file, and we're going to go all the way down to the bottom, because what's going to happen is, even though we typed that alias in, guess what? It's not going to stick. So you might want to put something in your bashrc like this. Just a note. This is kind of basic scripting here. So if you start anything out with a # or a hashtag, what happens is that it's just a message. So we're going to put my alias as, I guess, no. There you go. My aliases. And now we're going to add that same alias, rm alias. Did I spell that correct? No, you didn't. Remove equals single quotes rm dash I. And then that's it. That's the alias. So we'll go ahead and do that. Control O writes out the file. We did that. So what we can do now is we can exit Nano. And even though it's in memory, I'm going to show you how to load things in from your bashrc file. Use a period. This time around it stands for the source. It's a shortcut to a command called source. And what it does is it makes the shell read any file that you direct that to. So we'll do bashrc just like that. Now it read it in the background, and so therefore our alias is going to be in there. So you can alias anything. You can put a lot of things in aliases. It's not just simple commands. You can put maybe a couple of commands in there. But if you're going to be doing that, if you're going to be doing complicated things, the next thing that you can do in a terminal is called a function. Or in your bashrc file, you can use functions. Functions are like little groups of commands that you want to have loaded in memory and ready to run all the time. They are used in scripts and programs all the time. The concept of a function is that you can set the function and then later on you can call it up and it's been set in memory, and so whenever the system loads it will do a function. So let's create a function in our bashrc file. All right, so we created aliases, and so let's just give this a little notation as well. It's always very good to notate whatever you do when you change these files or you create scripts. It's a great thing to have happen, because when you go back and look at it 6-8 months later and you forgot what you were doing and why you were doing it, your notes can really save your butt, man. Don't worry about taking up space in a script with notations. The shell just ignores it anyway. Put as much of that crap in there as you want to, so you know exactly what you're doing. So this time around, we're going to call this my functions, like so. And there are a couple of formats for functions. I'm going to use one. There is another way to do this. Neither one is wrong. Whichever one you learn about first and you're most comfortable with, you can go right ahead and use. So we're going to call our function update. And you're going to spell it correctly, right? Yeah. Well, you still got it wrong. Dummy. T-E. There you go. Why does that Y keep popping up there? Thank you. Jeez Louise. So, in a function, we put this there. We have to have that little guy. And then we have to have this bracket right here. And then we can go down and put in our commands. So in this case, I just used the tab key. That's all you do. You tab over, and then that keeps things a little bit more readable. So in this function, we're going to do sudo apt update, which will go out and check for updates on an Ubuntu system. Tab again. And then we are going to do dist. Now, I know it's an old thing. I'm used to doing this, gang. Some people are going to say, you don't have to do that. You can just put in full upgrade. Well, I'm kind of old school. So we're going to put that command in like that. And then once we have all the commands in there, we close our function. And you do that with the bracket that points the other direction, like so. Now, you can put as much stuff in here as you want to. There is no limit. You can put full scripts in here. It's not really a good idea, but you can do it. And every time that your system loads up, what's going to happen is that that's going to be available to us. So, and remember, it's going to look here before it looks in the path. It's going to go look for your aliases first, then it's going to go out and look for the executable path. So let's go ahead and write that out. We'll exit nano again. We will read bashrc into memory once again, or source it, actually, to be correct. I said read in a video many years ago, and somebody said, that's the source command. It's not read. Okay, so I want to make sure I get it straight. So now, if I type in update, watch what happens. It's actually going to run updates on this machine. That simple. Now, the reason it didn't ask me for sudo is because we've been doing it so much that the sudo timer is still on. You know how that works. You type in a command and you do sudo whatever, and then it asks for your password. There's a timer running in the background. It lets you do that for a period of time. If you get up and walk away from the system and come back, then you're running into a situation where it's going to be off because the timer has redone its thing. Oh, well, dist update. Is that what I put in there? Duh. I made a mistake. You get the idea, though, but I am going to fix it while I talk through the rest of this video. Let's make that actually work, just because it should be upgrade. I was talking and typing at the same time. I put in update. There we go. Control O, Control X. Would you please read that one more time? Thank you. Now we run the update. And it runs again. So now you get the idea of how that works. Now the one thing that you don't get when you have aliases is the ability to search for them or autofill them. So I can't type up D and then tab. At least I don't think so. Let's see if that'll work. Oh, well, go ahead and install it. I don't care. Let's open up another terminal so we can work on it here. All right, make that a little bigger, because I want to double check that myself, because I don't think that the autofill works. Update. Oh, correct. I'm wrong. There you go. Oh, well, that's the beginning of other commands. But you'll notice here that it is the first on the list. So if I would hit that, guess what? Then it would run update, which is what we're looking at. Very cool indeed. See, this is all a matter of poking around and finding things that work for you. So I was going to say that didn't work, but it does. But one thing that won't work is which is a command that you can use to find programs on the system. So let's see. I don't think that does, but we're going to try it. Which update? It says, I don't know what you're talking about. So it doesn't find it there. And it won't find our aliases either. I mean, we can do which ls, which is actually a program and not a built-in. A built-in, like for instance, if I do which cd, watch. Which can't find that. And the reason why is because cd is what's known as a built-in. It's in the shell. So I can't do man cd either. But I can do cd help, and then I get information. It's not a separate command. It's not a program living somewhere else on the system. So that's why you can't get it that way. But yeah, somebody said in like the first video or the second when we were talking about files, they said you didn't show the which command. And I went, well, that's for finding programs. It's kind of different, but there it is. Now you've seen which and you know how it works. Let's go ahead and get out of here. And that's basically it. That's what I wanted to show you in this video today. I certainly hope that you enjoyed it, and it's kind of infotainment thing happening, hanging out, playing around in the terminal. And you are encouraged to go play for yourself. What I am going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of the stuff that I added to that. Wait a minute, I forgot to give it the file. I'm going to get rid of all that stuff that I added to the bashrc file because I don't actually use it that way. Do you know what I do? I create aliases and functions and things like that, but I don't put them in the bashrc file, I actually put them in scripts. And I have a bunch of little scripts that I have in my own personal bin directory. And that's how I keep up with that. I used to kind of modify this file and play around with it. And then I got to a place where I was like, that burnt me when I upgraded from one distribution version to a next one time. They changed something about bashrc. I preserved my old bashrc because it had all my edits in it, and then I lost functionality that was in the new version. And I went, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. So one of the things that happens is in your bashrc file, and I'll show you this, is that it looks for a file in your home directory called bash aliases right here. And if it finds that, then it loads the aliases from a file. So you just take a plain text file and you put your aliases in a list and it just reads them into the system. That's how it does it. See, it's using that source or read shortcut with the dot right there to do that. Right there. So that's how that works. And so you don't necessarily have to modify your bashrc file to use aliases. Create an alias file, or like I said, do like I do. I'll put an alias as a tiny 2-line script. It'll be like just, you know, the shebang, the description, and then one command. Boom. That's the script. And it works great for me. It's how I keep up with that kind of stuff, because then I can look in my personal bin directory and I see, oh, I don't have that, or I have that, or whatever. So anyway, you are now very much with a full head of new terminal stuff to go off and play with. So go play. Thank you for watching the video. These are fun Hangout videos, and I enjoy doing them, and I really enjoy reading your feedback. We've had a lot of great feedback thus far in this series. Be sure to check out EzeeLinux on the web. Check out EzeeLinux on Facebook. If you are a Facebook user, give it a like, if you would, please. And also check out our forum called EzeeTalk. It is fast, free, secure, and fun. And it's totally controlled by us, which makes it a little bit different than other forums you might see out there. A lot of times people are using things like Discord or whatever to do forums. We have our own server and our own software running on it that we've modified ourselves, and we consider it to be very friendly. And the we we're talking about is me and Jeremy O'Connell, because he's the head engineer around here at EzeeLinux. He sets this stuff up. If you want to know more about Jeremy, go to the webpage, go to the bottom, and go read about his stuff. So anyway, we're gone. I'm going to talk to you guys later. Don't know when the next one is going to be. We've been kind of doing this in a random, haphazard manner anyway, so who knows what we're going to be talking about next.